one of the most interesting paradoxes I found in my life is how God, yes, we believe in God over here. Now, which God? That's a whole separate sort of thing, right? Which God, right? Elohim, Allah, Yahweh, like which one, right? But God uses very imperfect people, right? Very unexpected candidates to transmit the message. And I mean, one of the best places to get examples of this is, of course, the Holy Bible, right? So many people, I mean, we're talking people who can't read end up carrying the word of God and making scripture. People who, are stutter like what I just did right now, right? Stuttering, they have a stuttering problem or some sort of speech impediment. They're now given the task to, spread the word, right? It's very interesting because if the Bible, at least the version we have, right? I know about the Apocrypha, I know about all that, right? So, but that's a sort of different thing, right? So just kind of taking it at somewhat face value. If the Bible that we have, if any semblance of, if any portion of it was truly written thousands of years ago, then it's interesting to see how the ancient, I mean, that's not even ancient, you know what I mean? But I guess you could say ancient for lack of a better way of putting it, right? The ancients already had this concept very well cemented of people playing roles in the greater schema of other people's lives. But those people that are playing that role at face value, right, on paper, as we like to say, you'd be like, that's not the guy, that's not the woman. And I know the Holy Bible and women is a whole other thing, right? But that's not the person that's supposed to be doing this. Why did God task him, right? Why did God task them? And I ask myself this question a lot. I think one of the answers is that God requires humility, right? Now, there's a lot to work with in just that phrase. Humility, God. We would need to clearly define those two terms to really come to grasp with it. Let's see how far we get here, but I don't want this to be an extensive sort of review of just word choice, right? But God, to me, is the overarching electromagnetic North Star conductor that keeps everything in motion and in its proper place in the cycle of life, right? That's for lack of a better way of putting it, right? We can get granular and start cutting into what God is, what God isn't, what technically God is to these people, what technically God is to that people, all that, right? But we're saving that, right? And then humility, I feel like humility, a great way to kind of determine if you're being humble is, are you overtaken by your capacity to be offended at something or at someone, right? If someone comes in sidewalk looking crazy and just tells you something, right? I can't even really think, just something that kind of has you looking at them like, what's wrong with you? Do you want to, let's say for those who are not scared of fighting, do you want to fight? Or at some point are you just like, that was crazy what you said to me, but what's up with you? Like, are you good? Are you good? That takes a certain level of humility, right? Because if you just want to prove, right, that no, I'm not this, right? Then that is, for lack of a better way, ego, right? And I've mentioned this before, but the word ego gets thrown around like a hot girl. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, it just gets thrown around too much to encompass too many different loosely encompass too many different qualities, right? But for these purposes, I think what do they say, for all intents and purposes, This is a good word to use, or at least to start with, right? And the capacity to be offended at what other people say or do to you, I feel like it's an indication of what the Toltecs call self-importance, right? Self-importance, right? You find yourself so important that what a random person on the street tells you can offend you so deeply that you will crash out over it, right? So bringing it back to God uses unexpected people, right? Unlikely candidates to transmit the message. And no, this is not me just like low-key telling you that I'm like transmitting God's message. That's not what I'm doing, right? So, okay, this is a thought experiment, right? We are opening the discussion so that then y'all can start commenting like, you know, this and this and that, right? That's really what we're doing this for, to open the discussion, to have these conversations that I don't see many people having, you know? So God needs humility. And one of the best ways to bring you back into a humble state, I think, is to witness someone else that you may judge to be not good enough, not clean enough, not holy enough, not devout enough, not well read on the Bible enough, or whatever enough, right? Not a good enough Muslim, not a good enough whatever. You would judge them, you know, kind of, let's paint this picture. You would judge them and feel like, oh, if anyone should be picked, I should have been picked. I would have been better. And see that right there? You don't know what configured that person that we're judging with the exact combination of defects and virtues in the exact ratio to transmit the message, right? You know, it's like, would you listen to a trainer who didn't ever really need to work for his body? He kind of was just naturally always built, right? He's not even that physically active. He just has great genetics. So like, he kind of just ends up like this, you know, with a at least halfway decent body. Would you listen to that? Or would you listen to the guy who was 300 pounds and then got into the exact type of shape that you wanted? You know what I mean? For trainer purposes, right? In that same way, it's like, I feel like we're so quick to judge, especially on the internet, which I understand. There's so much being thrown at us in the algorithm that we kind of need to judge at face value and say, this one no, this one right, this one no. You know, like that. Just like in a matter of seconds, we'll make these decisions. But if you're here, right, experiencing this video as I deliver it, I feel like this is something that we are coming to grips with more and more, is that there's only so much you can really tell at face value. And though it is valuable, what we can discern from that, it's not always our place. Now we can discern if we should be interacting with it, but I don't feel like it's always our place to make a judgment on whether someone is worthy enough, holy enough, healthy enough, strong enough to deliver the message that they're delivering, right? I always like to think in terms of this. It took a series of miracles for me to make it to you today. You know, I can say the same thing about you. The amount of dips, psychological dips that you had to go through and then regulates through, or not, right? Some people are going through, you know, myself included, there's so many dysregulating factors in my environment. There's also very regulating ones, right? Like the fact that I'm safe in a car, you know? But there's so many dysregulating factors, just living in the normal world, in the normal capitalistic world, I'll say, that it took, by the time I make it to you, by the time I make it to anyone's face, right, I had already climbed so much of my mountain, right? to finally get to you and deliver what message you have, right? Now to you or to anyone else, it may, me climbing that mountain or dragging myself or being dragged up that mountain or being drowned, you know, rolling down that mountain, like there's so many ways to go about it, but that may look to you crazy, and that may look to you like, this is not really what I need to listen to. But as the great Bruce Lee said, take what is useful, discard the rest. And I believe that there is at the bare minimum, there is a seed of something valuable and useful. There's two different things, right? Valuable and useful. Most people are useful, right? My bad. Most people are useful. But in being used, right? In being made use of, right? It sounds crazy, but that's the mentality that like the capitalistic structure sort of frames everything in. What can I make use of, right? How can I use that to my benefit? You know, not even our benefit, just a my benefit. You know, fuck whoever. I didn't mean to throw that F-bomb in there. You know, I was gonna say if you're underage, but even if you're underage, you've probably been listening to F-bomb since you were 5. So what am I? We're not all adults here. Come on now, Simbo. I use it for effect. That's it. All right. So I just find it fascinating. You know, I find it fascinating that you can walk up to a homeless drug addict, and if you just have the patience and the courage to talk to them, you'll end up walking away learning something about yourself, even if it's tiny, that you'd be like, and who's to say that was not God, right? There's this song that my mom loved. I think it's called What If God Was One of Us? What if God was one of us, right? What if God was one of us? But it's not a what if. God is experienced in every aspect of every moment. God is experienced in every aspect of every moment. But do we have the humility to be like, there it is. There he is, there she is, right? However you want to refer to it as. I generally don't polarize God into a he, because the whole world has done that, right? Welcome to patriarchy, right? The whole world has done that. And no, I'm not gonna go on and on about the patriarchy. We're not doing that. Not this video. But if you do want to know my thoughts about it, I think they're quite interesting. I may do another video about that, because it's some wicked stuff. It's some wicked stuff. But the whole patriarchy, the whole gender thing is tied to racism and, you know, ancient civilizations, and or I should have said the whole gender thing against women, right, is tied to ancient civilizations and morphed into racism. But it was mostly like a thing about the different species that is the woman. You know, women are almost different like, let's not lie, okay? Women are quite different from men. We are quite different from women. Now, we live in this world, so we've been acculturated and grown accustomed to similar things. So our mannerisms, right, are similar as far as a human race, right? But it's almost like women are a different species. They're just tuned a little differently. You know what I mean? They're tuned a little differently. So anyway, I don't mean that in a bad way, by the way. I love women. Full stop, okay? So, going back, unlikely candidates. God uses what we would perceive of as unlikely candidates to transmit the message. And I've noticed basically every day, I get reminded every day that your gifts don't really care about, are you virtuous, right? Are you virtuous? It doesn't really care about that. What it cares about is if you show up in order to develop the expression of the gift, right? if you show up to develop the expression of the gift. That's what the gift cares about. And now, granted, if you are what most would call a virtuous person, that most likely means that you have a storehouse of energy that you can now use to express the gifts, right? So it's not like being virtuous is bad, but or I should say, it's not even that it's bad. It's not that it's useless. Everything has a use depending on your intent, right? But yeah, I think really these are just nuggets, right? These are droplets of light that I just want to here look at yourself in that droplet of light and look at what you see what you notice, and be who you are, of course. Like I said, we're really just opening these discussions, and this is something that I really am enjoying doing. There's not many avenues for me to speak so candidly about these things, and trust me, I have not gotten deep. I really haven't. I'm really reserving the deep stuff for like music and like much more specialized community bases. But if you've been following my channel, you could already hear remnants of, reformed religiosity, study certain awareness about history and how humanity has gone. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying this because we're all very multifaceted, and some of us have really specialized sort of knowledge bases. And this is me making this video, is me not so much professing the knowledge base, but it is displaying who I have become as a result of being on this path of pursuing this knowledge, which all ends up being inner knowledge. It all ends up being inner knowledge, okay? Let me not get too long-winded. If you like this, well, then drop a like. Feel free to subscribe, because I'm posting quite frequently nowadays. I know I took a 2-week break. I'll get to that probably in another video, but the best thing you can do is comment and let me know, hey, what about when you said this? Or what I think of this is, or my experience here has been, or what, you're wrong because this, all of that. I impart what I give to you, and then you can give me a little droplet of light yourself. That way, the cipher is complete. My name is Simba Lumen. I'll catch y'all next time.